Chapter 6. The Powerful Descendants of Gregory Brunt. It wasn't long before Cleo and Kenneth were following Brandon into the woods near Cleo's house. Cleo and Kenneth had some supplies packed. By the sound of things, they weren't going to be back any time soon. "We just need a place to lay low and keep any aliens off our backs," Brandon had said. It was 4 a.m. when they finally stopped walking. Brandon built a fire and they all sat around it. "I wanted to send you my next message via another movie, but after what happened with that second movie, I couldn't do it anymore. See, a spy had told Melinda about my secret messages. She was able to block off any magic intended to send movies to Earth from the production company I was with. I knew it was risky, sending myself to Earth with such strong magic. But as I've informed you in my previous message, your world is in grave danger once again, and I need your help to save it, once again." Brandon paused. "The prophecy your gauntlet gave to Gregory Brunt way back in the day, it spoke of a ritual in which Lord Blazer's father would bestow upon him the powers that were lost to him. It would be performed on the literal darkest day of your world, when the moon completely eclipses the sun." Kenneth looked up from the fire. "An eclipse? That's just a week from now. Is that when Lord Blazer's powers will be restored?" "Unfortunately, yes. The misery caused by the darkness. It feeds Lord Blazer, and speeds up the recovery process. I would expect him to rise by dawn, 7 days from now." Kenneth stood up. "We can't let that happen. We must stand against him no matter what." "We'll stand against him no matter what, won't we? Just tell us what we have to do. There must be something." Brandon sighed. "I don't want to rain on your parade or anything, but if you think we can waltz into the alien domain, defeat the elder aliens without breaking a sweat, and killing Lord Blazer before he can be resurrected, you are mistaken." "Elder aliens? What are those?" Cleo asked. "Aliens with powerful mage-like abilities guard the crypt Lords Torches and Blazer are in. 4 top-tier assassins, if you ask me. The only people that could possibly match their capabilities would be those descended from Gregory Brunt, the greatest wizard of all time. Unfortunately, while I am a descendant of Sir Gregory, well, the history books pertaining to the alien annihilators record myself as the only known living descendant of Gregory Brunt. I may well be the last one alive." "Yeah, that's a possibility. But you don't actually believe that, do you?" Kenneth asked. "If there are descendants of Sir Gregory dwelling somewhere on Earth, it's our job to get the details, who they are, where they are, etc." Brandon considered that. "Well, I do know that Sir Gregory had 4 children. I am part of the eldest son's bloodline. He was the one most loyal to his father's cause, and was one of the top researchers in the Alien Annihilators facility. Even when Lord Blazer attacked the facility and demanded to know where Sir Gregory was, he didn't budge. He was almost killed because of his stubbornness. However, one of his less stubborn co-workers blurted out his whereabouts before Lord Blazer struck. But as we know, Gregory put an end to Lord Blazer in that hard-fought battle centuries ago. Although Gregory had 4 children, after the massacre on the Alien Annihilators facility, the younger 3 decided that they didn't want anything to do with opposing aliens. In fact, rumor has it they changed their last names and spread out across the country, intent on leaving their father's cause behind. So you're descended from the most loyal son, and the tradition of defending Earth from aliens was passed down. And while you're the last known relative of Gregory, It's more than likely that the other sons have a bloodline of their own, and their descendants are alive to this day, Cleo said. You assumed they were all sons, but in actuality one of them was a daughter. Though their gender is the extent of my knowledge, I do not know where they decided to escape to and settle down. Well, if we find this out, we're a step closer to finding one of their modern-day relatives. Where do we start? Kenneth asked. I wish I knew where to start. But even if we knew exactly which state and town they lived in, that wouldn't guarantee their great so-and-so grandchild would still be dwelling in that town. Anyway, we need a family history veteran to find out who Gregory's sons and daughters were and where their latest relatives reside. Brandon saw a light turn on in Cleo's eyes, like she just realized something. I might know just a gal for this job. She's the mother of one of my longtime friends, she said. Chapter 7: The Fate of the Three Lost Siblings. They'd stopped by Kenneth's house just to hop in his car and take it to Cleo's friend's house. Her name was Rachel, and she'd accidentally gotten herself involved in the fight against the aliens last year. Her parents were skilled in many areas, and the knowledge they passed down to her had been useful last year. Her skills in navigating her dad's motorboat had saved their lives. When they were almost swallowed by a humongous wave, her father hadn't been there to navigate the boat himself. He'd been away. Cleo just hoped Rachel's mother would be home. She knew more about researching the lineage of centuries-old families than Rachel did. When they got to Rachel's house, they hopped out the car, walked to the door, and knocked. The door opened, and Rachel stood before them. Out of the four of them, Rachel had been the one who enjoyed their time off alien duty the most. Her parents were rich and spoiled her in a way, and she spent the year shopping, sipping margaritas, and touring the country. She never cared much about the fight against the aliens, and after what she was put through last year, she seemed extra intent on distracting herself from it. What are you guys doing here? She asked, annoyed. Is your mother home? We'd like to speak with her, Cleo asked. No, she's at some charity event. Now buzz off, I'm busy. Rachel was about to shut the door, but Kenneth put his foot in the door. We think your mother might have important information about a special family. If it's okay, could we search her room? We won't take anything valuable to her. Rachel rolled her eyes. You guys are so annoying, she said, but let them in. So they went upstairs to her mother's room. Rachel followed behind them. I don't know what this is about, but I want no part of it, Rachel said. Don't worry, we didn't even really need your help last time. We needed your dad's help. Yeah, you did help us in his stead, but at this point we couldn't have less of a need for you, Kenneth said dismissively. Fine by me, she said. Once they were all in her mother's room, Rachel said, So all those books they're for my mom's family history research. She types info onto an online database. I've heard the earliest families in her database date back a couple hundred years. A couple hundred? Is there anything from the early 1200s? Cleo asked. I don't really. Oh, wait. Look, the years are actually on the books, Rachel said, pointing. Sure enough, they were. Thick books lined the wall, with each one dedicated to a whole century of family history research. In the bottom left corner, oh my gosh, Cleo whispered. There was a huge book. It looked about 2 bricks tall and 2 bricks wide. It looked impossible to find anything in there, but it was dedicated to the families of the early 13th century. She went forwards and pulled the book off the shelf. Once it was on the ground, she opened it to the front page. Everyone gathered around her. On the first page was a table of contents. Scanning through it, nothing caught her eye, and she began to worry. Where do we even begin? She thought. Aha! Look right there. Historically significant families. Gregory Brunt's last name has to be mentioned there. Turn to page 394, Brandon said. So Cleo turned to the page and they scanned the various subheadings. Nothing struck Cleo as being what they were looking for, but still, Cleo kept flipping through the pages, everyone trying to see how it could connect to Gregory Brunt's children. Cleo had been turning the pages for 30 whole minutes by now. Her hope was beginning to fade, until... Wait, what was that? Turn the page back, Cleo, Brandon exclaimed. Hopeful, Cleo did as he said, and he pointed at the heading of the first page, Persons of Interest in an Unusual Alien Resistance Group. Alien Resistance Group, Kenneth said aloud. And look whose name is on the top of the first paragraph. Gregory Brunt. Cleo got excited about what they'd find out next. After scanning the pages, Brandon spoke. It says there, Gregory's 3 other children, the ones uninterested in their father's cause, set off to some of the most remote corners of the country. The second eldest set off for a village just north of Heat-Stroke Desert, for he knew the aliens would not dare traverse the punishing heat of that wasteland. The third eldest, Gregory's only daughter, set off for a village east of the Frostlands, a land of utter cold. Snow-peaked mountaintops and billowing ice-dagger winds defined the lands one must cross to reach the village Gregory's daughter settled in. Finally, the youngest son decided that going underground would provide him safety from the aliens. After days traveling open caverns and narrow tunnels, he finally found the village he'd been looking for. But beware, a mysterious threat stands in your way. Watch for dark crawling things with snapping jaws and dozens of razor-sharp teeth. So menacing was the threat, it is now called Snapjaw Cavern. Finally, looking up from the pages of the book, Brandon said, Looks like we have one hell of a journey ahead of us. Chapter 8, The Days to Come, The Journey Ahead. Cleo couldn't believe what she'd just heard. These were some of the most deadly places on Earth, and they had to travel through it all on the off chance that they could track down a distant descendant of those 13th century mages. Rachel actually laughed out loud. That's not exactly my idea of a vacation, but if you're into getting yourselves killed, I suppose I can't stop you. Kenneth stood up and stepped forward. We're going no matter what stands in our way and whatever odds are against us. Brandon, teleport us to Heat-Stroke Desert now. I'm afraid I've dramatically exhausted my magicka just by getting here. The earliest I'd expect to be able to perform this would be, say, tomorrow morning. That's a whole day from now. That's a day we could be spending getting burnt alive in the desert, Rachel said jokingly. Kenneth gave her an irked look, then sighed. Well, I guess we need to get our things ready anyway for the journey. Water, hat, sunscreen, whatever we need to survive the journey. Kenneth walked out, and then Brandon. It was just Cleo and Rachel in the room now, alone. Suddenly feeling a bit uncomfortable, Cleo began to leave as well, then turned back to Rachel. You were a great help last year, and I'm sure you'd have a lot to contribute for us if you decided to come. I hope you're not actually inviting me on this suicide mission, Cleo. I have it made here. I get to do whatever I want. Why would I give that up? I'm sick of doing things for the good of humanity. I want to do what I want right now and not worry about what those crazy green-faced assholes are up to, okay? You get me? Rachel yelled out the last sentence. Cleo looked away. She began to walk through the doorway but said, I don't want to worry either. But I know if I do that, I don't want to worry either. But I know if I do that, it's gonna blow up in my face later. If it blows up in your face and everyone you ever cared about dies, I just want you to know you could have helped us stop it all. You could have helped us stop it. That's all, she said, then stepped out the door. They had spent the whole day preparing for the trip. Kenneth had dropped Cleo and Brandon at her house, saying he'd be back that evening once he packed some stuff for the journey and had a bit of rest. Unfortunately for Brandon, all of his stuff was back at the Temple of the Lonely Planet. He hadn't been aware of what would come after he came into contact with Cleo and Kenneth. He just knew that he had to inform them of the looming threat. Cleo had enough extra supplies to provide Brandon a pretty decent day pack for the desert. Water, extra clothes, and more. Cleo had similar supplies packed in her own backpack. Kenneth showed up at her house at 9 p.m., backpack ready. Cleo and Brandon were seated in the living room. They needed to discuss the journey tomorrow morning. Kenneth unslung his backpack, got seated, and said, Okay, we're pretty much ready. You how long would you say this trek across the desert is going to be? About a day, right? Ideally, if we keep a consistent pace through the desert, we should reach the village by nightfall. That means beginning our journey nice and early, 5 a.m. at the latest. But a word of caution. I've been to Heatstroke Desert on an expedition to the ruins that Sir Gregory discovered, the gauntlet, in several hundred years ago. The desert is covered with large sand hills. Dotted amongst these hills are large rocks. These rocks provide excellent cover for bandits looking to ambush weary travelers. So when you see a large rock, don't go near it. It's not worth the risk. And besides, if we travel fast enough, we won't need to shelter under some dusty rock for the night. The village will have an inn we can stay in and proper food. Okay, so be it. No going near the rocks. Anything else? Cleo asked. Yes. Bushes dot the landscape as well. Snakes and other deadly creatures like to build their nests under its protection. It would be wise to stay away from them, I'd say, especially when you hear the rattling of its tail. It's trying to scare off predators, so don't engage it if you don't have to. And finally, no matter how thirsty you are, don't drink the water in any of the various springs. The bandits poison them, intent on making travelers fall dead so they can steal their supplies. We must only rely on the water we bring ourselves, at least until we reach the village. These are the most pressing issues I can think of. Gods help us get there safely, Brandon whispered, as if in prayer. And so the party retired for the night, trying to forget their stresses for the sake of a good night's rest. Chapter 9. Preparing for Heatstroke Desert. Knock knock. The sound woke Cleo up from her sleep. Sitting up, she looked at the digital clock on her nightstand. 4 a.m. Who could that be? She thought to herself. Getting out of bed, she exited her room, went downstairs, and opened the door. Turning on the porch light, Cleo finally saw who it was. Rachel, and she had a backpack over her shoulders. Rachel, hey, what are you even doing here? We're just an hour away from. I'm coming with you, she interrupted, making her flinch in shock. Cleo began to voice her surprise, but Rachel cut her off. Now can I come in? It's freaking cold out here, she said, then let herself in. Cleo shut the door, then followed Rachel into the living room. I thought you wanted to live your life to the fullest and forget about this alien business, she asked. Rachel sighed. I tried to forget, really, I tried. But I thought about what you said and about how, if and when aliens take over the earth, and however many people they decide to kill, I couldn't live with myself, knowing I turned a blind eye to those who sought to halt the takeover in its tracks. And so I'm in. I'll do whatever I can to help, I promise. This brought tears of joy to Cleo's eyes, and she ran up and embraced Rachel. Rachel reluctantly raised her arms around Cleo as well, mimicking the gesture. Kenneth and Brandon came down the stairs. Kenneth went wide-eyed to see Rachel standing there in Cleo's arms in the living room. Seeing them, Rachel broke the embrace and said, I'm coming with you guys, even if Kenneth thinks you couldn't have less of a need for me, Rachel said, using a mockingly deep voice to mimic Kenneth's statement at her house the other day. That was a heat of the moment thing. But you're coming. That's great, really, Kenneth said, forcing a smile on his face. Rachel rolled her eyes. You don't need to pander to me, Kenneth. You can pretend you need me now, but we'll see who needs who when the journey's done. The corners of Kenneth's mouth dropped as he realized the facade was uncovered. Okay then, he said, then turned to Brandon. What about it, sir? We do have room for one more person, correct? Brandon nodded. My magica reserves will be completely filled come dawn. By then, I should be able to teleport one young senior and 3 old teenagers. Don't call me that. I'm not a I'm not an old teenager. I'm an Never mind, forget I said anything, Rachel said dismissively, still a bit annoyed. The next 30 minutes was spent eating breakfast and making sure all their supplies were packed. Cleo ended up packing a bit more food for the road. At 4:59 a.m., everyone was in the living room, ready to go. The 3 of them were looking to Brandon for instruction. Okay, when the clock hits 5 a.m., I am going to teleport us to the southern side of Heatstroke Desert. The desert is full of various terrors, but if we move at a continuous pace, we shouldn't have to spend the night there and risk getting ambushed. The bandits are a clever bunch and enjoy laying concealed within large rocks, and often pounce on the prey when they get too close. Don't go anywhere near the large rocks. Okay, I sense my magicka has made a full recovery. Before we go, tell me, are you all certain you wish to go? The heat in Heatstroke Desert will only be made bearable through the use of my cooling spell. Even then, it is quite rare for travelers to survive a day in that harsh climate. I'm in, Kenneth said. Me too, Cleo agreed. All eyes went to Rachel. They saw the fear in her eyes at what Brandon had just said. But how can that be? Shouldn't it be easy to survive a day in the desert? It's just hot weather, Rachel said. Well, yes, the hot weather takes a toll on all travelers. But even if we survive the elements, the various other threats may finish the job where the climate couldn't. In fact, it's quite common for bandits to strike travelers when they're at their weakest. Why do the bandits find it so easy to survive more than a day in the desert? She asked. The bandits, they have accumulated quite a large amount of wealth over the years, and have spent this wealth on clothing that will grant its user resistance to hot climates. Whether or not they can resist a fiery death, though, I am not certain. Rachel just stood there, uncertain about whether or not she wanted to go. We're 10 minutes behind schedule. Let's just go without her, Kenneth said after a minute of Rachel's reluctance. Hey, I'm still going. You guys will be hopeless without me, Rachel said, too prideful to back down. Then it's settled. Brandon, do your magic now, Kenneth said. Okay then, everybody hold hands. This will help us not get separated during the voyage through space and time. So they did as he said, and instantly it felt as though their bodies had lost all weight and were catapulted away at a blindingly fast speed. Chapter 10: The Bandit Camp. When the movement stopped and Cleo could finally feel her feet on the ground once again, she was surrounded by sandy hills, miles and miles of it in any direction. She even saw those large rocks dotting the landscape in the distance. Her friends were there with her, holding her hands. They let go and took in their surroundings. So the cooling spell is in effect right now. I do hope it works to all of your satisfaction, Brandon said, at Brandon's reminder of how hot it was supposed to be. Holy crap. Cleo could see Rachel realized how hot it was as well. Rachel immediately pulled off her backpack, took out a gallon of cool water, and started chugging it like she just drank a phial of Tabasco sauce. Kenneth grabbed the water from her and screwed the lid back on. The hell are you doing? We're gonna be out here for the whole day, maybe even more, and you're already... Rachel grabbed the water back from Kenneth, fumbled with the lid, and started downing the second half of the water carton. Kenneth just rolled his eyes. When the carton was 3/4 empty, Rachel finally stopped drinking. She looked at the carton of water and went wide-eyed when she saw how much she'd just drank. Then she looked at her friends. Just a heads up. I might need to borrow someone's water a little later on. Kenneth just snorted derisively and started walking in the direction the village was supposed to be in. Brandon started walking as well, not cool with the idea of sharing any of his own water to a woman as undisciplined as Rachel. Kenneth walked up to Rachel. I'm gonna give you 1/4 of my water, but you have to promise to ration it. Maybe a mouthful every hour or so. You think you can do that? Yes, I promise. The transition from cool weather to this blinding heat. It was just so jarring. I needed that water to help me adjust. I can ration it, trust me. So after Cleo dumped 1/4 of her own water into Rachel's carton, they both walked in the direction of Kenneth and Brandon. So that's why finding the mages is so important. It is crucial we have them on our side when we finally face the elder aliens. These aliens possess offensive spells so deadly. We wouldn't stand a chance against them on our own. Cleo had just finished explaining their situation with Rachel. It was a useful way to pass the time as they trudged on through the blistering heat of the desert. How are we supposed to know who this descendant of Gregory is? Will there be any obvious signs? Rachel asked. Well, I reckon this guy will be a very important person in the village. If his ancestors founded the village and used their magic to provide for and protect their people, it's likely this family tradition was passed down, even across multiple centuries. We'll find out who he is, I promise, Cleo said reassuringly. Kenneth was a couple of paces ahead of them, and Brandon was in the lead. An hour had passed since they started their trek, and they still hadn't come across. Brandon held an arm out, gesturing for them to halt. They were about to crest another large sandy hill, and Brandon slanted his eyes, trying to keep the sunlight out of them as he fixed his eyes on something in the distance. Oh no, it's one of those bandit camps. They've set up camp at the base of a large rock, Brandon said, then went into a prone position to stay hidden from view. The others followed suit. Why aren't they hiding? Aren't they supposed to be clever? Rachel asked. The clever ones won't be at the very beginning of the desert. They'll be further on, so as to give their prey time to become tired and weather weary. But these guys are hardened criminals nonetheless. We'd best stay away from them. We just have to go a ways to the east and walk under the cover of the nearest sandy hill. Brandon indicated the sandy hill in question. It was a considerable distance from their position, which made Cleo realize the sheer size of the valley the bandits were camped in. Luckily, though, there didn't seem to be many bandits. Cleo could only see 2 bandits under the curve of the large rock, but there had to be more in the tent near the rock, so 4 or 5 bandits total. Rachel looked at the hill far away. But I thought we didn't have any time to waste. The eclipse is just 6 days away, right? Well, yes, but to be safe. But Rachel wasn't paying attention. She was just scanning the valley below from her vantage point, so Brandon just trailed off. Finally, Rachel pointed. The bushes. They dot the landscape at regular intervals. We just have to quickly run from bush to bush. They'll never know we're here. That's a terrible idea. And plus, there are supposed to be snakes in these lands, and they like nesting in bushes. Right, Brandon? Kenneth asked. Brandon nodded. Ugh, fine, let's go the long way, Rachel said, and started to get up, but Brandon pulled her back down. We have to go down the hill first, and then backtrack a ways before making a northeastern trek. Or we could save hours and hours by just going my way. Honestly, am I the only one interested in not wasting time? Rachel said, then got up and started running to the nearest bush. Rachel, get back here right now, Kenneth said urgently. But Rachel was just looking in the direction of the bandits. One was lying down and the other was staring off lazily in the other direction. Don't worry, we'll go one at a time. That way they'll never see us, Rachel said, then kept running closer to the bandit camp. Kenneth started after her, but Brandon held an arm out. You going out there would only draw more attention to us. Just give her a chance. And don't worry, we'll help if she gets into trouble. Reluctantly, Kenneth obeyed, and just watched as Rachel continued to run from bush to bush. She was actually making good progress, and was already climbing the hill on the far side. Rachel stopped behind a bush to catch her breath. The valley was bigger than she'd realized, and the hill she was climbing was quite steep. Luckily, she'd taken Cleo's advice to ration her water, and still had half a gallon left. She unscrewed the lid and brought the carton to her lips. She felt a hard creature slither onto her lap, and after staying frozen with the carton to her lips, she slowly lowered the water to see what was in her lap. Oh, shoot! Throwing the carton aside in fright, she stood up and, while the snake was on the ground, she slammed her shoe on the snake's head, though only stunned it due to the soft sand of the hill. Grabbing the snake by the throat, she found a log to put this snake's head on, flailed her other arm over the ground to find something to use, then swung a rock at the snake's head. Blood spurted out of the wound and got all over her. Dropping the snake, Rachel fell to the ground, breathing hard. Her instincts might have saved her life then, but she turned her head, saw the approaching bandits, and rolled herself even closer to the bush. The bandits. They were walking towards the water carton she'd just thrown. Damn it, she thought. The carton. They're gonna find out I'm here. Rachel tried not to panic. Hey, Sir Darrell, check this out. Someone's just passed through here. Daryl grabbed the water carton his friend just passed him, then took a look at it. Then he looked back at him and grabbed the front of his shirt. You let him get away, Larry. You know what this means. We have to go scouting the area in the north, just in case they haven't gone far. Way to go, you ignorant twit, Daryl said angrily. I'm sorry, sir. It'll never happen again, Larry said, then fell to the ground as Daryl shoved against him. Larry didn't mention that Daryl had been sleeping when they were both supposed to be on watch. He just held his arms up, expecting to get a beating. When it didn't come, he slowly lowered his hands and looked at his leader. Daryl was studying something on the ground. Crap. Just as Rachel realized what had Daryl's attention, Daryl said, "These footprints lead to that bush over there, and the footprints end there. There's someone behind that bush. Hurry, let's get him, Larry." And this is The Alien Annihilators, Book 2, The Mages of Magic, chapters 6 to 10. And remember to subscribe and comment, showing your support for this series. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.